Hey, I'm Cass Traitor, and today I got some really good exposure with Meg talking about the horrors and discomfort of networking and also why a drag queen and a dominatrix might have more in common than you might realize.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Really Good Exposure. I'm your host, Megan Prescott, and today I'll be interviewing Cass Traitor. Cass is a writer and artist. They're a freelance feminist journalist who works as an editor for Red Insight, a digital platform for sex workers. And they make live art and short films about mental health, disability, BDSM, sexuality, and gender. Cass has also been co-devising and performing with the Sex Workers Opera for 10 years. Welcome to the podcast, Cass.
Thank you.
I start every podcast by using my kind of cringe line from Skins. I'm Megan fucking Prescott. Who the fuck are you?
I'm Cass fucking Traitor, mate. Who else?
So me and Cass met back in, I think we were just talking about this. I think it was 2020.
Yeah.
We were creating a digital theatre project with Sexquisite Events. I'm pretty sure it was 2020 because it was all Zoom. And then we later released it. But there was never any live performances, I don't think of it. But yes, so we've known each other for a couple of years now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I wanted to have you on the podcast because I'm having lots of guests who do all different kinds of work with the idea that when people hear about the pros and cons of all different types of work, they might realize that there's lots of parallels in lots of different industries. So I thought it would be really great to have you on because I know you have a lot of experience in a lot of different types of work. Can we start by you walking through a day in your life? I know that as like a freelancer, you probably won't have a typical day in the life, but maybe like an average day in your life. Just because when I was younger, I had no idea how to really do life. And I always wanted to know, like, what do people's days look like day to day? So now I'm asking people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that I have the luxury of not getting up early. This was a really important value for me as a worker, was that couldn't be built in, because when I used to do that, it used to really kind of mess my day up. So waking up at my leisure, having a bit of an existential crisis about whether I can get up or not. Assuming I can, then I have a really simple breakfast. My mornings are as close to nothing as possible. And then I kind of gradually introduce different sensory things like sound and taste and stuff when I'm ready. But it's a slow process. And then after breakfast, kind of mid-morning time, I'll deal with any kind of the most urgent things, if that's like, it's normally replying to emails.
Mm-hmm.
Then after lunch, if there's any meetings, they'll happen in the afternoon. Or that's the time when I kind of get anything done that involves going outside because there's less people around. They're all at work. Or ideally, my number one is going to the gym. And then any kind of creative stuff will always happen in the evening. That's when I feel the most switched on, really.
And are you okay to talk about the fact that you're neurodivergent?
Yes.
Sorry, I should have asked that
beforehand. Yeah, no, that's fine.
But I have found a lot that with creative freelancers that I've had on, a lot of us, the commonalities is sometimes we're neurospicy. And the fact that we do all have very different styles of working days is often maybe because we're neurodivergent, and the traditional like 9 to 5, wake up this time, go to bed this time, go to the pub and then go to sleep. It doesn't really work for neurodivergent people a lot of the time. So do you feel like that has had an impact on how you've like adjusted your work schedule?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of learned quite early on that, like, even though I can work on a computer and do kind of admin-y type jobs, I can't do that in an office environment. Like, there's too many people, the lights are too bright, there's too many distractions, and also the schedule, as I said already. And the idea of kind of being able to bond with people only in those sort of intense environments like pubs and alcohol. I realized quite early on that I was excluded from that. And so it was a joy to me to realize I could be self-employed, because then I could work from home and stick to my own sort of deadlines and capacities without having someone breathing down my neck if I'm not productive enough.
Yeah. I think if anything positive came out of COVID, which I know there were very few things, but I think the fact that people realized like, oh, maybe you don't have to be chained to a desk, or at least it doesn't have to be in a building in the middle of London to do it. And I think now some companies are more accepting of people want to work from home. And some people actually get more done when they're at home and comfortable and not wearing brogues and a navy suit and doing the rush hour. So I've assumed you consider yourself a creative freelancer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's it, because although I sort of started out in journalism, which is a lot more kind of dealing with facts than abstract stuff, I've moved more into becoming an artist, even though I'm still doing both those things now.
That's probably really helpful, actually, having a background in something that is more I guess academic, like more by the book, and then applying your creativity to that. So it's creative, but it has some kind of structure, because I can go wildly off structure and it doesn't work. But how did you get into journalism?
So I started off by doing stuff for like the like paper when I was at college, and then I did little bits here and there when I was at uni, and it wasn't paid. It was like, it would get me like gig tickets, and that was enough for me at that point. And it meant that I learned really quickly how to do it, because you'd see how the article had been published, what the editor had changed, and I could reverse engineer that and figure it out. So I learned by doing, and I did do some internships, and like, you know, there's a huge debate with that with the NUJ, the Journalists Union, because they shouldn't exist. But like, I learned more from doing work experience than I learned by doing a journalism course. And I think that you can try doing freelance journalism on the side of anything else. And I built that up. So yeah, and I think for me, the only way I managed to, you know, do the work experience was by signing on the dole. And I said, I was like really transparent about that with the publications, and said, I need to leave between these times every week. And I didn't tell them why, because obviously they don't want to be complicit in this. But, you know, I was really clear about my situation. And so, and one of those like internships did turn into a job that I got without being interviewed, because they needed people quickly, and was an editorial assistant job on a magazine. And they couldn't be bothered to recruit, which is, you know, typical.
Sadly, yeah. I feel like sometimes you can rely on people's laziness more than anything else. And that is how things like, you know, oh, so-and-so's daughter wants some work experience in this industry. And it's like, instead of going through the proper channels, they're like, well, I know this person, this is easier, let's just do that. But I'm all for people taking advantage of it when they can. But it's unfortunately often people who are like, very privileged people. But so I'm really happy that you were able to get in. But I was going to ask, so I am assuming that the internships were unpaid.
Yeah, or really low paid. And I think for me, like I sort of felt like with the interview thing, that so often, like when back in the days of doing things like job interviews, I felt like they probably already had someone in mind that they wanted anyway. So I was going all through this for nothing. So it felt like at least they weren't doing that, right?
This is the thing. And people do that. Like I won't name any names, but I have heard through very reliable sources that in acting particularly, for a lot of things, they know who they want to play the role.
Yeah.
But they have to prove to, I don't know, producers or higher-ups that they can justify their casting budget by doing castings in all different locations. But they know going into it, we're not actually going to cast anyone from this region because it would cost too much to get them here. But we'll cast them because we need to justify our casting budget. So these people are going to auditions like taking time off of their part-time job, learning all the lines, not getting paid to do it, putting their heart and soul into these auditions, and never knowing that they weren't ever going to really be considered. And how sad is that? I think that's
Yeah.
similar things happen in a lot of industries.
I think so, especially with casting, because they can write a character with an actor in mind. And I also feel like with that, it's like, I can't remember what I was going to say now. So you can just pause it at that bit. Thank you. But yeah, I feel like with publishing as well, this was such a small company that, like, you know, we had bailiffs turned up because of unpaid bills, and I had to say to the guys, like, I'm a freelancer, I don't have a contract here. Please don't take my laptop, which I carry with me to work every day.
God.
I know, but then the boss called the police, and like one of them was like, "Oh, I know your magazine. So it's a queer magazine." So they soon dispatched these bailiffs.
It was a queer magazine, so she was a fan.
And so they got rid of the bailiffs. So I have had one good interaction with the police in my entire life. That was obviously because she was gay. But
oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Well, at least there's that.
I feel like I've given you 2 exceptions to the rule now today already. So.
So you were in journalism.
Yeah.
And then now you do more creative work. So what was the thing that made you decide that you wanted to go into more creative work?
I think I had just been kind of shut off from my creative self for a long time. Like, I was a really creative kid. Like, I didn't really play much with other kids, but I was always writing stories and drawing pictures and like staring at pictures of animals and flowers in the garden and stuff. And then as a teenager, none of that was cool. And so obviously things like, you know, smoking and stuff instead take place.
Very cool.
Yeah, exactly, apparently. And then I really think it took me to my 30s to reconnect with my creative self again. So it's never too late.
Yeah, no. And I wanted, do you think it, do you mind me asking when you started thinking about potentially the fact that you were neurodivergent? And did that kind of coming back to creativity overlap at all with that?
I think the neurodivergent stuff came later, actually.
Okay.
That's been only in the last few years. And that was sort of dawning on me how obvious it was in some family members. And then obviously some other people in the family getting diagnosed.
Okay.
And then I'd kind of known, I feel like I'd always known there was something different about me, but I'd been, as if you do your own research on your own self, it's like, you know, how do you know? So I'd kind of like tried to pinpoint it in a few different ways. And then a friend of mine who is autistic was like, have you ever thought that you might be? And then as soon as they said it and I started to kind of connect the dots, I was like, oh. And then other close friends that have spent heaps of time with me, I said it and they were like, oh yeah, obviously.
There's that meme, isn't there, with, it's like when you tell neurotypical people that you're autistic, they go, wait, well, you don't look autistic. Oh, well, you don't do this. Well, you have friends, you make eye contact. And then when you tell neurodivergent people you're autistic, they're like, we know.
Yeah. You're like, we've seen you in the morning, Cass.
You don't need to tell us.
Yeah.
We're well aware. Yeah, I do think it's funny as well, because a lot of people will say it's hard to, like you said, research yourself because you've never not been yourself. So you don't know what's quote unquote normal and what isn't, especially with autism, because it can run in the family. And if a lot of your family members are autistic, they might be like, well, that's normal. Everyone does that. And it's like, no, you do that because you're also autistic. And then I tend to enjoy the company of other neurodivergent people more. So if all your friends are also neurodivergent, you might be like, this is normal. No, everyone does this. No, it's not. But yes.
Completely. And I think also we like our parents are of a generation. Our parents are of a generation that didn't really talk about mental health or disability when it came to like anything in the brain. And I think if you've got autistic parents, they're probably too autistic to realise that you're autistic. I love my parents, but yeah.
It's such a catch-22, isn't it? Because I've said to, who did I say it to? It was someone, and I was like, yeah, these are kind of some of the symptoms, I don't know if that's the right word, but like characteristics of autism. And they've taken it so literally that if they don't present those exact symptoms, they're like, well, it can't be me. And I'm like, no, but the root of that is not the fact that you have to be really good at languages to be autistic, but it's the fact that you're really good at learning patterns, and languages, I guess, are patterns. But it is a catch-22. Like sometimes you can be too autistic to realise you're autistic.
Yeah, because the literal understanding of things and looking at these examples and thinking, well, that doesn't line up precisely to that.
Exactly.
Is an autistic approach to things.
Exactly. And combined with the fact that all the research essentially as done on young boys like 50 years ago. It's like, yeah,
it's a thing that's written by men about men. So
if
it's
you're not obsessed
hard,
with
isn't
trains,
it? Yeah, exactly. Sorry,
you can't be autistic according to all the research, which is very little. I find it really interesting. I do think that there is a huge connection between neurodivergence and creative freelancing. Yeah. And I do think when people like shit on the self-employed or the creative freelancers, I am like, right, but do you think if I could do a well-paying, normal day job where I just knew what I was getting paid, knew where I was supposed to be and when, knew what the future was going to look like, I would love it if I could do that. But my brain doesn't work like that. So you saying that I'm either lazy or, oh, she doesn't want to do a proper job, she wants to do all her arty stuff, that is actually, it's not really discrimination. But when you're like, your brain works differently and different jobs suit people differently. So just because you can do an office job does not mean everyone should.
I think it can feel quite ableist because I was long-term unemployed before I started doing those internships. And I think the problem was when I was on long-term unemployed, I was relying on benefits. So I had to stop the freelance writing work that I'd done little bits of when I was a student because obviously you're not allowed to do that.
Exactly. Another catch-22.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I found this way around it and that got me back into work. But like if I had to do a employed job, I'd still be long-term unemployed.
Yeah. Even some jobs which are, you could argue, creative jobs, so much of the workforce is wedged into this structure of kind of 9 to 5. Like when I was in America and I had a friend who was working for Fox and I was like, wow, in the UK, writing, you're a writer, you're creative, you're at home, you're like, you don't need to be in an office every day. But in LA, it was very much like, even if you're a writer, you go into the office from 10 till 6 and that's where you are. And I'm like, it's so weird how we've forced even jobs that are creative into this neurotypical format because the workforce is based on neurotypical brains. And it's such a shame because I think so many people can't do that. And we miss out on so many talented people's work just because they can't fit the structure of their work.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not only this extreme work ethic with like presenting yourself as a worker at all times to be taken seriously. I feel like there's another element, which is that we're expected to be networking, which is awkward as hell, and I hate it. And I feel like I'm really happy that I've got to the point where I keep plugging away and doing stuff, not really telling that many people what I'm doing. So, thanks for inviting me on your podcast. But also now, like through this weird ether of work trickling out of me, people come up and ask me to do stuff. And I'm like, that's nice when that eventually starts happening because I'm not, it's not a direction that I'm, I'm not proactively putting myself out there and going to all these things that I should be going to just to tell people who I am and what I'm making.
Yeah. And it is so unfair that such a large amount of jobs and connections are made in the creative industry. And I think lots of other industries as well, but a lot in the creative industry that revolve around networking. And that word alone sends shivers down my spine. Like, if you don't have a +1, so no one you can cling to, and you're just, the social rules, there's alcohol involved, there's music, you're supposed to chat over the music.
And make small talk.
And then when does the small talk end? Like if you get stuck on a one-on-one with someone and you want to like move on, go get a snack or whatever, how do you exit the conversation? It's horrific. But I have found that there's been so many times when I forced myself, basically made myself ill by making myself go to all these networking events. And I've afterwards been like, fuck, I actually made a connection that led to work through that, which I would not have got if I didn't go. And then I'm like, but it shouldn't be like that because why are we expected to, I have to go to bed at 10:30. I need 9 hours sleep. Otherwise I really fail to function the next day. And if I've had alcohol or if I've gone to bed at like 1 a.m. because I went to a networking event, my life genuinely suffers.
Yep.
But if I don't, I miss out on potential work and really good contacts. So it is nice when there's options where that you don't have to be like arse licking or like just doing the fake social thing in a network.
I know. Are you going to add a trigger warning at the beginning of this podcast and say trigger warning networking? Because I feel like even just hearing about it, and also online networking, right? Being expected to create a social media persona and also do stuff like LinkedIn, or like for me, when I was a bit more into journalism, I was expected to keep blogs and Twitter profiles going all the time because I was expected to be responding to what was happening in the world at all times. And I was like, if I actually do that, that's taken up from the hours in my day that I do have to actually write or to research or to pitch ideas, i.e. things that involve getting paid and doing my actual job.
Yeah.
And so I realized that doing both those things wouldn't make sense. And like, I'm not saying it's ideal, but at least like with acting, you can get any agent and they can do the bullshit for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas I realized as a self-employed person that I was supposed to do all these things myself, along with things like tax, because I couldn't afford an accountant. And I still do it myself because I'm a control freak.
Yeah. But people do assume I've had this conversation with people before, and it's been quite frustrating sometimes because I think there is this attitude that if you're in a creative job, or even if you're in a job that you like a field that you like, there is this kind of attitude sometimes where it's like, well, you like it. So like you have to have all the negatives because you're in a job you like. And then it just feeds into this capitalistic thing of like, you don't have to like your job. You just need to keep working and be as productive as you can for someone above you and be a cog in a machine and blah, blah, blah. But I do find that people will treat creative freelancers, they'll treat their work like it's a hobby. I've probably said this on the podcast before. They'll treat them like it's a hobby. They'll pay them like it's a hobby and be like, well, you're lucky you're getting anything because it's your hobby. So nice if you can earn a little bit of money. But then when you turn around and say, actually, I'm not being paid enough to make this my full-time job because I still need to pay my bills. They want you to work the hours of a full-time job, but only be paid as if it was a hobby. And I'm like, you can't have it both ways. We have to value creative work just as much as we value academic work. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck when there's no fucking creative. I think in COVID, everybody realized without creative freelancers, the world is pretty boring and we all need entertainment. Like it sucks.
Yeah, I feel like with self-employed people, especially like 0 hours contracts, there's an expectation of, you know, deliver all the things that are expected from an employed person, but with none of the benefits, you know.
Really none of the benefits, like none of the structure, none of the pay benefits, nothing. And you don't like, I don't ever want to take things away from people who do have like more standard jobs, not to be insulting, but like the regular jobs. Yeah. Because I know that some of them are very fucking hard and people work for years, but I always use the example of like a lawyer. Like if you're a lawyer, if you always wanted to be a lawyer, it takes years of work and like thousands of pounds to train and get there. But the structure of how you get there is pre-written. You don't need to figure out your own structure of how to climb that career path. You know you need to train, you know you need to do, I actually don't know the path of a lawyer, but I guess like there is a path, right? Yeah. But with a lot of creative freelancing jobs, I feel like it's like, yeah, you're going to have to work really fucking hard, also not get paid, also invest a lot of your own money, whatever you do make, back into yourself. And also you're going to have to figure out the structure because one doesn't exist. You're going to have to like make it yourself. So that's like not just working hard, that's like also reinventing the wheel with every fucking job you do.
Yeah. And I also think of my lovely dad, who we spoke about even before we got started here. And for years, he was fixing washing machines. And I used to go with him sometimes on the weekend to people's houses, all different houses. Often they're quite fancy because they can afford to get someone around to fix it at short notice. And they would treat him like an absolute hero. They would say what an angel I was. And I just thought, yeah, my dad is, because he was doing something that people really needed. And I realized that apparently I'm not. So I think I should just retrain in the washing machine trade.
But people do need entertainment.
I know,
like
that's the
people
thing.
will lose their mind if they're not entertained. Literally how like Netflix exploded in COVID because, and all the people behind that, most of them, I guess, like the actors, the writers, they're mostly creatives. I know also like producers and people making a lot of money off of them, but still, like, I think it showed we need entertainment. Yeah. But yeah, people just don't appreciate it and don't value it as much as they would value like a job that's much more black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so difficult. And I think things like, well, speaking of entertainment, OnlyFans exploded over COVID.
Yeah.
And that's how my entire life changed around, because my friend was like, you're insane. You have to start OnlyFans. Like, there's money sitting on the table here and you're not taking it. Like, you have to take it. And it was still very much a job and I still had to work really hard on it. But if it wasn't for people being bored at home and wanting to go on OnlyFans and look up someone that they liked on TV, I would be still sharing a bed with my mum. Literally, you do need creative freelancers, and OnlyFans content creators, I do think, is creative freelancing.
Oh, definitely.
As a creative freelancer, I guess we touched on this, but does your freelancing pay your bills, or do you have to do side hustles in like 9-to-5s or like part-time jobs or generic work? And if you don't, how long did it take you until you could do your freelance work full-time?
Yeah, so I kind of got into magazine publishing at a time when there was work going around, and then all of a sudden print costs went up, postage costs went up, advertising went out, so the industry just tanked, and so it meant that I didn't. No, reverse all of that. I already had a side hustle. Which I started when I was a student, and I was failing my degree and broke, so I knew that like a regular part-time job wasn't possible. So that's when I started doing sex work. And so for me, doing like 2 hours or maybe a 2-hour booking as a dominatrix would give me the same money that I would have got working in a bar. And it meant I had a nice outlet for the cathartic, annoyance of men in my day-to-day life. And I really loved it. And it fit around my studies. And it was really only as I, wanted to quit a day job that I was really struggling with and go self-employed, that I realized I had that as a safety net, and I never could have done it otherwise. And I was going from like, trying to sustain myself in like full-time jobs and either not getting the job in the first place or getting it and not being able to stick at it.
Yeah.
So this was what gave me the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a common thread on the podcast.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who are sex workers. So
yeah.
I'm just always fascinated by the stories I read about sex workers, as well as my own and my friends' stories about how sex work has meant that their other work is much more, they're able to do it. They're able to do what they want because of sex work. Or if sex work is what they want to do full time, how much more satisfying that is than being forced to do something that doesn't suit them. And I just think it's hilarious when people will say they don't want people to do sex work. And if that is the case, their first port of call should be make sure that students who are having a hard time paying their tuition back because it's tens of thousands of pounds don't think, oh my God, how am I going to pay this back? I'll do some sex work, because that is realistically, that's the job that makes most sense. I'm sorry. If you can, if I could work, I worked at a Wetherspoons for £6.15 an hour for 3 years. I'm annoyed at myself that I didn't start doing sex work earlier, because I would have, who knows where I would be in my creative career right now if I didn't spend 7 days a week cleaning up after drunk men. I would have been much better mentally and physically, I think. But yeah, it is frustrating, and I'm very glad that sex work was able to help you support what you do want to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so at the moment you are writing, you're an editor at Red Insight.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with them?
So I always had a dream, like I always wanted to start a magazine for sex workers, because I started out in the magazine industry. And I've always loved the way that you can just sink into a magazine, and it's like there's a whole lifestyle surrounded around it. Like, it's super creative. You can think about how you want that to look on the page. It brings together so much. And I think it means the people that are feeling isolated can see themselves in that publication. And you can take that publication anywhere, particularly if it's an online publication. So I always had this dream, but I'd never been able to get the right people together to do it. So it was kind of at the back of my mind. And then I saw a job advert where they were like, we need an editor for a sex work magazine. And they'd already done the awful bit in the first year, 1 year, 2 of like getting funders together, getting a board of people together, and getting like the management-y things and like accountancy, all that horrible stuff, which is impossible.
Yeah.
They'd done all that and then they'd created this job. And so I was like, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Please.
What's the catch?
And so when I applied, I was like, I'm probably going to sound like too enthusiastic. And like, if someone's like, I've always wanted to do this, you're like, yeah, that's what they all say. So I tried to like dial it back. I don't know if I succeeded. But yeah, this is probably, it's one of my favorite jobs because of what I've just said. And also the a really small editorial team, but like everyone on it is just amazing to work with, really inspiring. We're always learning from each other and supporting each other. And it's wonderful because some of the people that I'm supporting who are writing articles are completely new writers.
That's so great.
And then it means they get that process of like, they've said their story. They've also had someone help them hone it to like a professional standard. They've got paid a professional standard that a writer's fee would get. And then other times I get people who are super experienced and they'll present me with loads of ideas.
Yeah.
And everything in between. So I love it because it does involve a bit of outreach.
Yeah.
That I feel like it's right to have me doing that job.
Yes, yeah.
Because I've got that lived experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the value of credits nowadays.
Yeah.
Honestly, the value of credits, like written on paper, I don't think it should be like this, but on paper, what you can prove you've done. I don't have a degree. I don't have any fancy training, but I did do a short course like we were talking about at a film school. And, just having that on your CV, I couldn't believe how much different people treated me when I had that on my CV versus when I didn't. But I was like, I don't think I have an enormous amount more of experience now, but I have something provable written on my CV that I did, I guess. But credits for writing, my God, especially as a new writer, to give someone a credit for doing something, they can then go and take that and get another job.
Exactly.
I think with creative writing particularly, you get stuck in this loop a lot of you need experience, but you can't get experience without experience. Mm-hmm. So like, what? Like
exactly. And people shouldn't be writing for free,
exactly.
to get those credits. And I think you've got to start somewhere and learn somewhere. But even if it's really low rate, at least it's something.
Yeah.
And then also the problem is if your skills aren't up to a certain level, people are going to get AI to do it instead. Because if it is a low skilled level or a non-specialist form of writing, then yeah. So that's a new competition to add into the mix.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's really impossible. I had a heated discussion with someone the other day about it was about acting and supporting artists. Mm-hmm. And it was someone who was casting a short film and they were saying that they are only getting supporting artists that can do it for free. And I obviously went off on one and I was like, but you don't understand how valuable a credit is, even if it's in a short film to a new actor. Mm-hmm. But if you're saying it's unpaid, then you're making it so that only the people who are privileged enough to be able to work for free can apply. First of all, you're like making your pool of talent much smaller and you're not as likely to get as much options in terms of talent. But also you're making the whole industry inaccessible to people that don't come from very privileged backgrounds because who can work for free?
Exactly.
And it's so frustrating because even though that seems like a really small thing and, well, when hundreds of thousands of people will do work for free, why would you pay someone? But I'm like, well, we have to set the bar and we have to say that this is a valued job. So it's paid, even if it's a low fee. Yeah. I just think you shouldn't be allowed to offer any creative freelance work for free. I don't know if it's like anti-working class, basically. It's like, how the hell can you get in if you can't get paid for this work? Like,
that's the thing, isn't it? And I feel like with employment, it's kind of impossible to get like a permanent gig as a permanent job as a writer, like unless probably someone or whatever. But so I kind of always knew I'd have to go down that route. But there are lots of different levels of pay with it. Whereas I think the structure of employment is such that there's so many legal protections, which, are amazing and people have fought hard for. But the problem is it means that you're either working for like nothing or you're working for that minimum level. So small companies can't be agile. People can't like cut their teeth at like half the going rate, which is what I did in sex work. Like nobody trained me how to do it. I got a client and I said to him, I haven't done this before, but you've seen a load of pros.
Yeah.
I'll see you for half the going rate, but you give me feedback in exchange.
Yeah.
So I learned myself and I was like, that's kind of, I have to learn by doing stuff. I don't learn by reading a book or by somebody telling me how to do it. That doesn't filter in.
Yeah.
So how else am I supposed to do that?
Exactly. And I feel like, again, I feel like sex work is an alternative to rich parents sometimes. Not even rich parents, but like, what else? I mean, the play that I'm taking to Edinburgh this year is about this whole thing. I'm like, I'm doing sex work to fund taking a show to Edinburgh because it's costing tens of thousands of pounds. Like, that is a catastrophic amount of money. Like, it's supposed to be fringe festival, like and fringe theatre.
It doesn't make money, does it?
No, the best case scenario, if I sell out all tickets, I will still lose thousands of pounds.
Yeah, it's like, really scary.
What world are we living in? Like, but if you don't take your show to Edinburgh, people won't really pay any attention. And I'm like, so people wonder why the same stuff keeps getting made into TV and not really doing very well. And it's like, because no one else has access to it. And I'm not saying mine will be like amazing and better than everyone else's, but like, I've got a different life experience than I think a lot of people. So it's worth giving people a shot and not saying, well, you need to spend your entire life savings, more than your entire life savings, like just to put on a show here.
Yeah.
It's chaos, the creative industry. And I'm hoping it's slightly changing. But I do think until it's changing and it's more accessible, don't shit on people for doing sex work to fund their creative work, because what's the alternative?
Right?
Like,
and if we only have like privileged artists come in, then things are going to get boring. Like, so, but also I'm going to tell you something quite soul destroying, which is obviously, you know what an executive producer is, but like, I'm right in thinking it's basically someone who'll give money and they have to think it's a good idea, but they don't necessarily need to be involved in the production.
No.
So
it depends for what, but they're more on the money and organizational side than the creative side in most places.
So they're kind of sugar daddying the film to be in normal speak. And so, like some of my clients, they've got disposable incomes. And so, one of them said to me, they've got money to waste on me entertaining them for 2 hours to pay my month's rent. So, that's the perspective of where they're coming from. And one of them said, who does this executive producer thing, said, well, I quite like things like antiques, the south of France, driving fast cars, pretty young women, and just listed things of that kind of genre, if this is a genre.
Yeah.
So I decided that that's what this show should be based on.
You know what? Depressingly, I think that's how a large amount of decisions in like Hollywood are made. It's like, well, I'd quite like to see a young girl get naked on this show. Yeah, I'll fund it. Yeah, oh, this actress is going to get naked in it. Great. Like, I do think a lot of things get funded that way. And it's like, that's why when only the ultra privileged are funding these things, because they're the only ones who can afford to do it, we're getting kind of like stale, boring stories.
Yeah, no, I feel like I break my back on funding applications to try and sound like politically relevant, to sound like it's some heartfelt thing and there's like a real substance to this story and it needs to be heard. And, all these hoops are being jumped through.
Yeah.
But I can't compete with Mr. like South of France and antiques and pretty young women.
But does it have tits in it?
Well, exactly. I mean, it does, annoyingly enough, but probably not enough tits. I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
Question.
And even funding applications, I got funding application fatigue because like internship fatigue, like application fatigue. And I think part of it is because when I got diagnosed as autistic and having ADHD, I realized like, a lot of not all of them, but a lot of these applications are highly inaccessible. They ask vague questions that you're supposed to know exactly what they mean. And unless you pay a producer who knows what they mean to do it for you, you won't get the funding.
That's it.
And it's like, you need to have there's a whole online system with a 20-page application. And I can't even look at it because it's so inaccessible and I don't understand. And I realized I am spending 4 days of my week applying for jobs and applying for grants and applying for funding and training programs or whatever. I'm not getting paid for this 4 days a week. I was like, I can't afford to keep applying for training internships. Yeah. But if I don't have the experience and I won't get like a proper job in that industry. But again, like a catch-22, like how do you do it?
Because the skills for being good at writing applications aren't necessarily the skills you need in that job. So it is really ridiculous. And of course, like most established artists are paying people to do it for them, which I understand because that's a more economical use of their time. But I'm like, okay, but the second that starts happening, it creates a professional level of standard that these like funders are used to reading. And so you or I, get paid to write, and still 99% of my applications are no. So
or a no, thank you.
So basically keep going.
Yeah.
But, through
it's
some
hard.
tiny shred of resilience.
Yeah. It's this is, I do have hope for the creative industries, like in the future. I just think I would like things to be changing faster than they are, but I do see them changing very slowly. But yes. But I always ask people how they find other people, particularly people in quote unquote standard jobs, react to their work. So I guess both sex work and journalism and your creative work, like how have you found different people react to those different jobs?
I think that for me, it's because there's these different fragments of my life. It depends which I present. And I think the problem is for me is that because I don't see any of them as like a career or like I'm climbing a ladder and I'm trying to get more and more things out of it or get published in bigger and bigger things or whatever. It means that anyone with those values is going to treat me a bit weirdly because I don't share those priorities and I can't be bothered to try and justify or explain or whatever. So it means if people are like, oh, you're, what have you been published in lately? Or where did you last perform or whatever? Because all of a sudden it's like, well, if I haven't got like a juicy answer for you, then you're going to be like, well, what are you doing? Whereas obviously with sex work, that's like the most intense one of all, because something that I do literally 1 or 2 days a month suddenly defines me in this really like bizarre way where I'm like, like I've created this character and I'm really good at playing them, but like it's actually, the second they're out the door, the heels and the corset get thrown off. I'm into a onesie, eating pizza and not functioning for the rest of the day. Like that's the real me. That's the juicy content that people don't want to know about.
Yeah. Well, it's like they don't want to humanize you. And it's like, no, I'm just trying to pay my bills.
It's just little old me. Or like, I suppose because like pro-doming is quite a particular niche within the industry as well. So a lot of people haven't met one, even if they are familiar with some people in the sex work community. And so often people say the most hilarious things like, oh, but you smile, like you're so nice. And I'm like, oh, you think? Like, and I'm like, sometimes if I want to play with it, I'll be like, well, I'm a yin yang. Like the fact that I get to be so nasty at work is why I'm so nice the rest of the time. So
I get it all out.
Like I quite like to troll people. Or like one of the worst questions I think people ask me is like, do you have sex with your clients? And for me, like as a queer, like non-binary neurodivergent person, like sex means so many different things, especially if you're kinky as well. Like, so first of all, it's like a stupid question. But also it's like, I know that they are creating a value system there where if I say, yes, I'm having sex with money, they'll be like, oh, you're like one of those. And I'm going to get like the same level of stigma as a full service sex worker. Whereas if I say no, then I'm throwing those under the bus. And they're going, oh, you're better than that. Like I can breathe a sigh of relief and be more comfortable. Yeah. And like actually, I'm not going to answer that question. Not that you would ask such a stupid question, but I would say that the levels of like intimacy physically that I offer, whether I'm doing it with my clients or not, whether I'm doing penis and vagina things, is the same.
Yeah.
And that when I work with other people on the job, because I'll bring in different people sometimes for different things, they will be like, our yucks and yums are like, there's things I do where they're like, I could never imagine. That is terrifying. Like, no shade, babe, but how the fuck can you do that with that? How does that even fit? Are you not worried? How are they still alive? And I'm like, no, fair enough. And I will have the same reaction to half the shit they do.
Yeah.
And the same level of respect and like gratitude, actually, that we can both fulfill each other's gaps. So it means that when people ask me that question, I will throw it back at them. And like, if I think they deserve like a rational answer, then I'll be like, well, why do you think that matters actually? And force them into an uncomfortable moment.
I love leaning into an uncomfortable situation that someone else has created. Yeah.
But my other one is, if I'm feeling facetious and I know they're not like intelligent enough to engage with me anyway, is to just ask them a fucked up personal question and response and be like, so if they're like, oh, do you have sex with them or not? I'm like, like your pubes, like, do you normally like trim them or shave them or wax them or just go like, full 70s muff? And then they'll, obviously be weirded out by my question. And I'll be like, well, I just thought we were sharing weird personal questions right now. Yeah. Sorry if I misread the situation.
It's also, I feel like if you turn around and we're like, well, what is sex? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Because that question is very, heteronormative aimed. Like, because you know what they mean.
Yeah.
But it's like, you don't want to say what you mean.
Yeah.
But if I said, oh, well, I don't touch, there's no P and V or like there's no penetration, again, they would create a hierarchy of what's okay and what isn't and what's better than, and it's like, no, why does that matter? So if it is okay, if there's no penetration, then are you saying that people in like women in same-sex couples are not having sex? Like, no. So you're showing you're a heteronormative. You just assume everything's heteronormative. I can't think of a good word for that.
I think they're showing their like lack of awareness about queer sex, aren't they? And they're probably showing that they're pretty boring in bed as well. Sorry, I don't mean to,
tell me you're shit in bed without telling me you're shit in bed.
Yeah, like there's nothing wrong with being vanilla, but like even within like vanilla sex, there's still different ways of doing stuff to get off.
I always found it really interesting. Did you ever watch Girls of the Playboy Mansion?
Yeah.
I'm obsessed, and they're now doing a podcast where they talk about each of the episodes. And I always thought it was really interesting because when I was watching it, I was like 11, 12, I think, or 13. And I always thought people's obsession with asking them, do you sleep with Hef though? Do you have sex with him? Do you have sex with him? And Bridget once in an interview was like, do you have sex with your husband? Like, what are we doing? Like, I don't ask you about your relationship and the ins and outs and how you have sex with your husband. Like, can we talk about other things? Like, why are you obsessed with knowing what happens? And like, obviously that's quite a specific example, but I find it interesting that they made a career off of not quite explaining exactly what went on, because you can guarantee if they said, yeah, we sleep with him, we don't really want to, but like we do like the lifestyle and like it's not like the end of the world that we sleep with him, they would have been demonized and like, because then it's official. Then it's like official that you're sleeping with someone in exchange for something.
Yeah.
But because they teetered on the border, society's okay with it. And I'm like, it's just weird that we're so anti-sex work that we can't have anyone even slightly associated with it, even though transactional sex is happening all the time.
World's oldest profession, apparently.
Yeah. We just can't, as long as we're not benefiting from it, then it's okay. But yeah, it's fucked.
But I also have a theory that sex work is like a loophole created by the patriarchy, because if all genders were like up for sex equally, we didn't feel so like self-conscious about what we wore on a daily basis, or because we didn't get certain reactions to it, that kind of thing. If it was a level playing field, because we weren't slut-shamed and stuff, then we could all access sex freely on the same level. And then because there is a disproportionate need among straight men. And so that is what is allowed women predominantly. And obviously the sex industry is made up of all sorts, but it's really female majority industry to, utilize that loophole.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And this is why I get so disappointed with sex worker exclusionary radical quote unquote feminists who say like, oh, we can't have women doing sex work if we want feminism to move forward. And I'm like, but it's so sad that you've been like coerced by the patriarchy to believe that sex work is anti-feminist, because what is more feminist than the one loophole that women have to use it to try and climb the ladder and be like, get out of this fucking situation that men have created. Like, if you don't want people to take advantage of situations that could benefit them, make sure that there's no gap.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
there is a gap. Like,
or
so
if you don't want people doing it out of desperation, or like when they've got not that many choices and they don't really like the idea of it, but that's the best shot they've got, then people should get more money from benefits. People should have better access to benefits. There should be,
exactly.
That's the thing.
You're it's like, the spilled puddle of milk is like sex work, although I don't want to compare it to that, but like the bottle is benefits being sanctioned and universal credit and university fees being so extortionate. Like, pick up the bottle before you complain about the puddle of milk and shame people for having a puddle of milk or whatever. This is a bad analogy, but I don't understand how it hasn't been so obvious. People just it's very upsetting. And I relate a lot to what you were saying about when people ask you, the first question people ask you a lot is like, what do you do? Like, and you realize, okay, this is me trying to impress you with what I've done most recently. And I think that feeds into the thing of this whole thing where we think people are as valuable only as much as they are contributing to capitalism.
Yeah.
So, and then I also think that relates to people being neurodivergent as well, because people will say like, use incorrect terms like high functioning when they're like, oh, well, you appear to be contributing to capitalism. Like, you go to work, you do the normal things in society, you have relationships, so you can't be neurodivergent. And I don't think that's how we should be measuring things. Like, if I've been asked, oh, what are you doing at the moment on dating apps? It is, when I was dating, I was like, oh, why is the first question we ask each other like, what do you do? Like, how do you earn your money? Obviously, you don't say how do you earn your money, but it's like
then you go back to doing networking again.
Yeah, I'm just ask me what I'm passionate about and what my hobbies are and what I want to change in the world and whatever. Like, but it does come down to our like shame of sex and the fact that we all have to contribute to capitalism.
It's also just a turn off if somebody asks me that. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be into that.
Yeah.
Or, like if somebody asks me the obvious questions like, how old are you? Or what's your job? Or, I'm like, these things don't really mean that much to me. So,
and it shows that it means to them and you're like, oh, we're not compatible then. Like, thank you for making this easy.
By doing the normal things.
Yeah.
No.
So I ask a lot of questions about work to highlight like the parallels within a lot of different types of industries.
Yeah.
But is there like a random fact about your work that people might not know?
Yeah, I would say I guess actually we all know about fake news these days, don't we? But I would say like when I got into journalism, I really was wowed by the amount of lying that happened. And it wasn't even anything for anything bad, because I was just working for this small queer publication. It was just the fact that like something's about to be printed, and if you don't, if there's an article I'm trying to finish that day and the person I was meant to interview hasn't shown up, so I have to make up a mystery person and a mystery quote. Like there's you have to constantly problem solve. And so even when you're like doing the right kind of journalism where you're, like covering things in humane like ways and being really nice and shining a light on really important projects, and you're not doing any weird exposing, there's still loads of dishonesty that goes on in that.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I found it quite fun in a way, because I felt like ultimately if you're trying to do the right thing and people are just enjoying like a lifestyle publication to relax into, then fact checking doesn't really matter.
That's so funny.
So yeah, that surprised me. But I also felt like if you don't, in a way, like in any job, there's heaps of shortcuts kind of thing. But it just really struck me that the shortcuts that get taken. And I learned so much from doing that. I think it really made me feel a lot more capable to go alone.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, fun fact about sex work is that, you know, I spend more time ordering supplies, sending emails, looking at accounts, like, than actually spanking people. Just, you know, that's the reality here.
It's so annoying because it's still a lot of admin. But
Yeah.
you
but
can't
like,
get away from admin.
But I also think the admin's very simple because somebody's like, here's my sexual fantasy. And then I have to be like, sounds great. When are you free? I mean, it's not quite that simple, but essentially I can do that without having to actively engage my mind. And also because this is the longest standing job I've ever done. So like I can do it. I don't really have to, I can sort of do it with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't, but you know what I mean? It's the easiest thing. It's the easiest kind of work I've ever done. But I would say it probably took me a long time to get to the point where it became easy.
Yeah. And also, just because it's easy for you, it's because you're good at it.
Yeah.
If you like a large percent of other people, I think it wouldn't be easy for it. It'd be incredibly difficult, but it just shows like your brain is wired to be very good at that.
Yeah, it's like I was already an expert at masking, and also like I'm terrible at things like dating because it's lots, and relationships in general because they're really confusing. But being a dominatrix means that you can create a set of rules of how you'd like to be like engaged with, and your set of do's and don'ts. And there's people that actually like those, like to be treated in that way.
Yeah.
And the fact that my face doesn't move much gave me this sexy air of mystery. And, you know, like the fact that I might have quite like odd posture and don't like to sit straight and stuff, but it's like the work outfit does all of that for you. That creates, you know, with heels and of course that makes you then know how to like look right.
Yeah.
So, and I also felt like being super feminine always felt like a form of drag in a way to me. Mm-hmm. So applying that to the work of dominatrix made complete sense. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like it is like a form of like clowning or like being a drag queen, and that you're just working with people's energy. So because I often experience like sensory overload and get like really tune into people's energy a lot as a survival mechanism, here I was in a room, like, again, using those like survival mechanisms and turning them into a skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree. The masking thing, like, it's like, oh, I'm doing this job already for free. Like, is this a way I can make money off of it? Oh my God, thank God. I happen to be brilliant at it because I've been doing it all my life. Like, yes.
But I wish there was career support for people who, you know, are not following a typical career path, or who are neurodiverse. And because it can't just be being a dominatrix, there must be other jobs which are really well suited to autistic people. Yeah. Because otherwise, you know, there's not enough jobs doing what I do.
No.
So they mean there must be other things.
So the podcast is called Really Good Exposure. Yeah. And it's all about like life lessons I've learned because I had over a decade of doing like really shit part-time jobs, or any industry you can name it. I've probably had a job in it.
Yeah.
Until I discovered sex work and I was like, oh, this suits me absolutely down to the ground. And it also means I'm able to continue with acting and writing without being like always broke.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot of lessons in that decade, which actually have really informed my creative work.
Yes.
But I still, if I could have not found out the hard way, I would absolutely do that. Mm-hmm. But is there any lessons that you've learned throughout your life, either in your career or just general life, that you wish you could teach people without them having to learn the hard way like you did, if you did?
Yeah, I think really it's just to try things and to start doing it, and to not think that you need to do all this training or get all of this advice or do all this networking. Just do it. Just try and do it. Give it a go. And I wish I'd known sooner that the things I've learned to not give a shit about now, like climbing a ladder or trying to get a day job. Like, I think I did actually learn that quite early on, but you know, like it would be great if people knew that straight away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I think it's also about the fact that you can't, if you try and set your dreams up into something like super specific, that's not also a good idea. Like, I'm doing lots of different things and they all like really enrich me. And some of them are also not enriching sometimes and they just pay the bills. But like, it was only by giving myself the freedom to like try lots of different things, do lots of different things, and then allow myself to go in different directions. Like, it's only with flexibility at work that I'm able to work. So I feel like it's just knowing that there's different ways of going about stuff, and that isn't the advice I got when I was going to the job centre every 2 weeks, like they, even when I was put towards like, and I was actually eventually given like an advisor on self-employment when they got sick of my shit and realising that they could
just give it to them.
yeah, exactly. And so then, like, and he helped me a bit, but there was obviously still nothing translatable into what I have told you in the last hour or so, It was just more the fact that like I could be doing stuff rather than nothing. That was so I wish there was more advice out there for people that want to create like lots of different lots of different strands, because I think if you try and focus all on one thing, you're probably going to get burnt out and you're going to feel like a failure if you don't. And also, like, I would really rather be a jack of all trades. I don't think there's any shame in that. And I think that often I'm using skills from one job in another.
Yeah.
And actually, when I was younger, I tried to keep these strands of my life quite separate. And that was quite terrifying because I always knew it was a ticking time bomb before I'd be outed anyway. But then when I started creatively, kind of anonymously making a reflection on sex work, because I needed some kind of creative output from it, just for my own like mental health, really. Only then did I allow these strands to start to come together. And it's only then when things started taking off for me.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
As soon as you're like being your most authentic self, that's when I really relate to that, because with acting, it very much used to be, you be a blank slate, only about acting. You be trained, you be like silent and like you just fit the bill. And I tried so hard. And when I was stripping, I was like, this can never come out. Like I will be ruined. And it was only because I got so desperate and I no longer had a choice. Then I started doing OnlyFans and I was like, I'm going to have to promote it on my Instagram because that's the only way I'm going to make money from it. And honestly, the things that have happened since I started being like, you know what, fuck it. Yes, like I've done different types of sex work and I'm not like ashamed of it. People are like, oh, really? That's interesting. Why don't you talk about it in this? Like, and it's informed my creative work. And literally things only started to work once I blended the different strands that I was desperately trying to keep separate. So it's really interesting that you said that. I can relate a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I've been given opportunities. Like, I've given guest lectures. I don't have an academic background. I've given guest lectures on sex work in relation to different things because of bits of like articles I've written. And so I feel like people want those like authentic voices, but they want people to also have like a certain skill set as well.
Yeah.
So by hiding in the shadows in these different strands, I was never able to show my potential in those different ways.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
But I think there's also that fear that like at the moment culture allows us to be vocal in a certain way, like, and that might change. So I feel like I'm still conscious of like how I present myself in different ways to try and protect myself. So I think it's still important to be wise. And I think, because I've been doing these things for like coming on 20 years and I see like baby, like anything coming into any of the industries I've just described at a point where things probably feel not that stigmatized. And I think actually we do need to be careful of this.
Yeah, because I feel like it might be the case that like maybe publicly people know that they can't publicly be as shameful and stigmatizing of things like sex work. But that doesn't mean behind closed doors and in their minds, they're not still just as homophobic that they've always been.
Yeah.
And so it's like, they don't need to tell you, I'm not hiring you because I know you used to do stripping and I don't like that. But that could be the reason. Like you never know how fucked up someone's mindset is. They don't need to tell you.
And like when I was 20, I never thought about what the future could hold beyond like, you know, what I was doing that weekend. But like now I'm at a point where I'm like, maybe I want to get a mortgage. Maybe I want to adopt a child. Maybe I want to live in another country. Like there's a whole load of other things that I might think about doing. Now I'm considering adulting. and you know, like in that consideration, if I'd been too out, if my legal name was splashed all over stuff, no way.
Yeah, it's crazy. Speaking of that, where do you see yourself in like 5 years?
So I actually don't know. Like these kind of like, I feel like I kind of like toy with this idea of doing these serious things. Like, but the answer is I don't know. Yeah. And I kind of quite embrace that don't know-y. I'm like, I'm working on projects and some of them have shorter aims or longer aims, but none of them are as far ahead as that. So I don't really know. But like, I hope that in 5 years' time I'll have a cat. But I don't know because I still haven't kept a plant alive. So that's my kind of, if I can do that, then I can, you know, think. But I think also a cat would tell you when they're hungry. A plant doesn't,
yes, exactly. Know. Plants are like, they need to speak up if they want watering.
Yeah. Come on.
And what are you working on at the moment?
So I'm in the middle of funding application hell, actually. But for an amazing project because I've got this really beautiful close friend who is called Ooze and Gloop, and they are self-described as a mean, green, artistic, autistic drag queen.
Okay.
And they're just incredible. And I met them on an artist workshop that they were running, but we had this like immediate creative connection. And we did a performance together at Whole Festival last year, which is like a queer techno festival. And we just pulled it out of the bag quite quickly because we just wanted free festival tickets, to be honest. But it unleashed something incredible in us where we were like, oh, holy shit, we've just discovered something that we need to do more of. And so we are trying to get funding to do a performance that fuses together live art, like BDSM, being autistic. And do you know what the Wheel of Emotions is?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's like this patronizing therapeutic tool which maps out all of the feelings. It's useful.
Do they give it to autistic people when they're like, how are you feeling? Yes, I think I have seen this.
Yeah, and on the one hand, I love it, but also hate it because part of me is like, actually, I don't know. Often if someone asks me how I feel, I only really know good or bad.
Yeah.
So like it is useful to narrow it down, but that I also don't like somebody telling me that that's what I need to be doing.
Exactly. Yes. It's like, I'll figure it out myself. Go away.
So like the premise of this live art piece is that we do these BDSM acts on each other and have these everyday conversations. And then if someone ever wants to talk about their feelings, then they use the wheel. But then something happens when someone experiences something that's not on the wheel. And what do we do then?
Oh, that's great. That's very good.
Thank you.
Exciting.
Yeah, so that's hopefully we'll be doing that at some point this year. Let's see.
Oh, amazing.
And I think that like a pairing, bringing a drag queen and a dominatrix together, like
match made in heaven.
Yeah. So I'm excited for that. And I'm also writing an article at the moment about the sex workers opera because this project came about 10 years ago. And it was a really big personal journey for me as well, because that's what got me back into being creative when I stopped as a smoking teenager. Like it took, so it was a huge journey. And it's also what connected me to a sex work community as well. So it was really life-changing. So it feels right to be like honouring this project 10 years on.
Oh, that's so good. I didn't know it'd been 10 years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so amazing. Okay, and I know you're not huge on the old. You're not in love with social media, but is there anywhere that you want listeners to find you or any of your work that you particularly want to shout out?
Yeah, so I would say check out Instagram. I make an annual post on there. And I'm Cass Traitor on Instagram.
Great name. My favourite name.
Thank you. My friend Bimini, the Bimini Bon Boulash.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
When I was like working out, because it started out as an artist name before it became something that I loved and realised I needed to use all the time. And when I was talking about whether I should use this name or not, Bimini was like, leant against the wall, put one leg up and was like, you could tell people they could call you Cassie if they really know you. And this really like seductive feminine tone. And I was like, mate, no, it's actually probably going to be like Casper because I'm more of a friendly ghost than anything else.
But, so many facets of this name.
But like Bimini's energy behind it was what made me go, no, that's the one, babe.
It needs to be adopted. Yeah.
And I love a casserole. So, wait, well, what was the...
where can listeners find you or any of your work? Maybe, so the magazine Red Insight.
Yeah, so that's what I was also thinking. It would be great if people check out Red Insight or Red Insight Media, I think gets you to that point. And like, it's a Netherlands-based organisation, but all of the content is in English as well as other languages. So that means most people can read it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so great. I feel like I relate to a lot of your life experience. And so, yeah, it was a really insightful podcast. So thank you very much, Cass Traitor.
Thank you. It's been really wonderful, Meg.
Thanks.
I've had a ball. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Really Good Exposure with me, Megan Prescott. If you like the podcast, please subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. And if you're feeling extra generous, give it a nice review. If you want to find me online, my Instagram is @Megatron. That's MEGARTRON. Threads, I'm also Megatron. I'm on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, @Meg_Prescott. And you can find a number of ridiculous videos involving me on my YouTube channel by searching youtube.com/Megan Audition. You can find more information about me and what I'm up to on my website, meganprescott.com. And if you have any questions that you'd like me and my guests to try to advise you on, please send them in to megartron@protonmail.com. And I will answer the ones I think I could give the worst advice to. I'm just joking, I give excellent advice. This episode was brought to you by me, Megan Prescott. Recording, editing, and post-production by Adam Grigg. Original music also by Adam Grigg. Thanks again for listening and for all of the really good exposure. A lot of the topics that we talk about on Really Good Exposure relate to women's rights, worker rights, and the sorry state that both of those are in right now. I believe that women have the right to choose what they do with their bodies and how they make their money. And I believe that how we choose to use our bodies should never, ever alleviate perpetrators of violence from accountability. I believe that all workers deserve basic human rights and protections, and I believe that predators are always responsible for violence, not victims. If you agree, please consider donating to National Ugly Mugs. National Ugly Mugs is a pioneering national organisation that provides greater access to justice and protection for sex workers. Sex workers are often targeted by dangerous individuals and face obstacles to reporting, access to services, and police protection. Those who harm sex workers offend against all of us. You can donate to National Ugly Mugs using the link in the show notes, and you can follow National Ugly Mugs on Instagram at National Ugly Mugs. Thank you.